You think too much. That's what they say, isn't it? Maybe you've heard it from someone else. Maybe you've whispered it to yourself at 2 a.m., paralyzed, staring at the ceiling, watching the hours slip by, and still no decision made. You tell yourself you're being careful, responsible, smart, but deep down there's another feeling lurking: exhaustion, self-loathing, regret, because thinking, for all its glory, has quietly become your prison, and Nietzsche saw this coming. Long before the internet made it possible to drown in opinions, long before the age of algorithms and endless comparison, Nietzsche gave us a dark warning. He who thinks too much always loses. At first it sounds wrong, anti-intellectual, almost barbaric, but look closer. He wasn't against thinking. He was against the kind of thinking that replaces living, the kind that questions every instinct, second-guesses every dream, and slowly turns the most powerful minds into the weakest hands. Because too much thinking is not wisdom. It's delay, it's fear, it's paralysis, dressed up in intelligence. And if you've ever spent hours analyzing a decision and still done nothing, if you've ever known what you wanted but talked yourself out of it, if you've ever missed your moment because you were busy preparing for it, then you know exactly what he meant. In a world that worships intellect, no one talks about its shadow, its cost. But Nietzsche did. He knew that too much thinking robs you of instinct, action, and self-trust. That overanalysis doesn't create better choices. It creates none. And if you let it, it will make you brilliant but invisible, smart but stuck, aware of everything, but unable to change anything. This isn't just about thought, it's about power. Your power, because thinking isn't free. It comes at the price of movement, and sometimes to win in life, you have to shut the mind up and let something deeper speak. So before we go further, ask yourself, how many times have you thought yourself out of your own life? To Friedrich Nietzsche, the greatest dangers were never outside us. They were inside, subtle, respectable, even praised. He feared the mind, not because it was weak, but because it was too powerful, too capable of constructing illusions, too eager to turn every instinct into a debate, too easily seduced by the safety of endless reflection. Nietzsche believed that when thinking becomes a way of life, it stops being a tool and becomes a tyrant. You start to question your impulses. Your courage fades into caution. You become clever, but not bold, educated, but not alive. And worst of all, you begin to worship reason like a god. But Nietzsche didn't believe in that god. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he describes the last man, a creature of comfort and calculation, safe, content, and completely dead inside. A man who avoids risk, avoids suffering, avoids greatness. This is what happens when thought replaces instinct, when everything must be explained before it can be felt, when nothing is done unless it can be defended. You don't fight, you don't leap, you don't create, you just wait. Wait for clarity, wait for permission, wait for certainty that never comes. And as you wait, the world moves on without you. This is not the life Nietzsche admired. He believed in something else, something raw, untamed, unapologetically alive. The Übermensch, the one who transcends, the prison of thought, not by rejecting it, but by mastering it. He acts when others hesitate. He speaks when others revise. He dares when others retreat. And most importantly, he trusts himself. Because Nietzsche understood that life is not a philosophical problem to be solved. It's a force to be embodied, a risk to be taken, a fire to walk through. Thought is useful, yes, but when thought becomes endless, it becomes the enemy of action. And without action, there is no art, no love, no power, no you. So ask yourself, is your mind your tool or your master? Do you think in order to live, or do you live inside your thoughts? Because thought, unchecked, will keep you safe, comfortable, and completely irrelevant. Nietzsche's warning was never about stupidity. It was about bravery. The bravest thing you'll ever do is trust your gut when your brain screams no. Why do the smartest people often suffer the most? Why does greater awareness so often bring greater hesitation? Because the mind, for all its brilliance, can become a maze, a place where possibilities multiply so fast, you lose the will to move at all. Psychologists call it analysis paralysis, a state where thought no longer serves clarity, it serves confusion, where every decision becomes a threat, every option a trap, and every action a potential mistake. So you wait, you analyze, you plan, you rehearse, and life, it slips through your fingers like vapor. Jung called it psychic inflation, where your inner world becomes so overgrown, so loud with ideas and fears, that you lose all sense of what's real. Overthinkers aren't weak, they're overwhelmed. Their minds never stop. Endless loops of what if and but maybe and I should have. It looks like wisdom from the outside. But on the inside, it's torment. The deeper the thought, the heavier the burden. You begin to feel like a stranger to yourself, cut off from instinct, emotionally numb, disconnected from your own desires. And this is where Nietzsche's critique hits hardest, because overthinking isn't just a psychological problem, it's a spiritual crisis. You're not just frozen, you're at war within yourself, a war between the part of you that wants to act and the part of you that demands perfect answers first. But those answers never come. Because the mind was never built to give you certainty. It was built to calculate, not choose. And the longer you wait for the mind to decide for you, the more powerless you become. The frozen mind becomes a self-made prison. Every new idea becomes another brick in the wall, and slowly you vanish. Not physically, not immediately, but invisibly. You stop showing up, you stop risking, you stop living, and in this silence you begin to confuse stillness with safety. But it's not safety, it's death in slow motion. Nietzsche knew that the cost of overthinking wasn't just time or happiness. It was power. The power to act, to fight, to become. So if your mind feels heavy, if your thoughts feel like chains, maybe it's time to stop analyzing. Before you were taught to think, you knew how to move. Before you analyzed consequences, you acted on impulse. You touched, tasted, shouted, leapt, not because you calculated the outcome, but because you felt alive doing it. This was instinct, raw, undiluted, the ancient part of you that still lives beneath the intellect, the part Nietzsche believed we were taught to silence. But why? Because instinct is unpredictable, untamable, dangerous to a society that prizes control over vitality. So instead of honoring it, we were trained to distrust it, to cover it with thought, with rules, with fear. But here's what Nietzsche knew. The human being is not just a mind with a body. You are an animal with a spirit, a primal force capable of astonishing clarity. When you stop doubting it, and that force, it's not chaotic, it's not foolish, it's the root of your will. Nietzsche called it the will to power. Not power over others, but power over your own life. The will to choose boldly. To speak when it's uncomfortable. To move when others hesitate. To say yes to life even when it's full of pain. This is what instinct gives you. Not blind reaction, but a felt sense of who you are and what you must do. The tragedy is that many people spend their entire lives explaining their dreams instead of chasing them, debating their passions instead of igniting them, and they call this being smart. But really it's a kind of self-erasure, because without instinct you're not thinking clearly, you're thinking fearfully. Instinct isn't the opposite of intelligence, it's the engine of it. It tells you when something is right before logic can explain why. It pushes you into unknown territory, not because it's safe but because it's necessary, and when you follow it, when you let that wild inner compass guide you, you begin to feel something you may not have felt. In years certainty, not because you have all the facts, but because your soul finally agrees with your body. And that's when life starts to move, when you stop questioning your every step and start walking like you belong where you're going. Nietzsche believed that the return to instinct was not regression, but resurrection, the rebirth of your power. The kind of power that doesn't ask, is this okay, but says, this is mine, you don't need another opinion, you don't need more time. What you need is already in you. It always has been. Nobody is born an overthinker. You're born to move, to feel, to respond. But somewhere along the way, that natural rhythm gets interrupted. You hesitate. You replay conversations. You imagine worst-case scenarios. And slowly, you begin to live. More in your head than in the world. This isn't intelligence. This is self-doubt in disguise. Overthinking is not the disease, it's the symptom, a symptom of something deeper. You don't trust yourself, not your instincts, not your emotions, not your ability to make a decision and live with it. So instead, you outsource your power to thought. You build elaborate arguments inside your mind, not to gain clarity, but to protect yourself from risk. You think so much because you're afraid to feel, afraid to commit, afraid to be wrong. But here's what Nietzsche knew. Self-trust isn't born from perfection, it's born from struggle, from risk, from experience. You don't become confident by having the right answers. You become confident by acting even when you don't. But modern culture doesn't teach this. It teaches you to hesitate, to double-check, to always defer to someone smarter, higher, more qualified. So you do. And the result? A life lived entirely in the hypothetical. Where you always prepare but never arrive, where you always plan but never leap. And this is what Nietzsche hated. The way society conditions us to distrust our deepest impulses, the way we become strangers to ourselves because we've been told we're not enough. So we overthink, because at some level we're waiting for permission to be who we are. But no one can give you that, and the longer you wait, the heavier your thoughts become. Until thinking isn't just exhausting, it's your prison. Nietzsche's solution wasn't to think less. It was to trust more, to reconnect with the inner voice you've buried beneath logic, fear, and the need to please. That voice doesn't speak in full sentences. It doesn't ask for approval, it just knows. It says, this is the relationship that drains you. This is the job that's killing you. This is the thing you're meant to do, if only you'd stop delaying. But to hear it, you have to get quiet, not with your environment, with yourself. You have to stop defending your fear with logic, stop justifying your paralysis with analysis, and start trusting the strange, quiet pull toward what feels real. You'll never think your way into self-trust. You earn it by acting before you're ready, by speaking before you're sure, by stepping forward, even when your mind screams at you to turn back. Every time you do, you shrink the distance between who you are and who you pretend to be, and when that gap closes, overthinking ends. Not because you figured everything out, but because you finally remembered. You were never broken, just hesitant to believe in your own voice. Let's say it clearly. The world does not reward the person who knows the most. It rewards the person who moves first. History doesn't remember the quiet genius. It remembers the one who dared to act, even with imperfect information, because while you're stuck in your head, someone else is already building, speaking, creating, failing, adjusting, winning, and not because they're smarter, but because they refuse to wait. Nietzsche understood this brutal truth. He warned that the modern mind, obsessed with reflection, could easily become disconnected from life itself. That when thinking becomes an end in itself, we mistake it for progress, but it's really just elegant procrastination. We convince ourselves that we're preparing when we're actually hiding. We stay in research mode, waiting for the right time, crafting theories and philosophies about who we are and what we want, but never embodying any of it. And here's the twist. The world isn't judging your potential. It's responding to your behavior. You might have the most brilliant ideas, the deepest insights, the perfect plan, but if you don't act, they dissolve, like vapor in the sun, because action is the only way the internal becomes external, the only way vision becomes legacy. And this is what separates the few who shape reality from the many who just talk about it. Those who act shape the world in their image. Those who think too much often live in someone else's. This doesn't mean you shouldn't reflect. Nietzsche himself was a philosopher, but he was a philosopher who felt, who suffered, who risked madness in pursuit of truth. His thoughts moved him. They broke him open. And in that breaking he became. Thinking should lead to becoming, not stalling. So if your thoughts don't push you forward, if they don't make you sweat, risk, or build, then they're not thoughts. They're distractions. And the longer you cling to them, the more distant life becomes. It's easy to romanticize the intellect, to believe that being an observer is safer than being a participant. But safety is not fulfillment. And brilliance, without courage, is just potential, buried alive. Nietzsche's call to action is clear. Live dangerously, not recklessly, but decisively. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to move anyway. Let your feet hit the ground before your mind convinces you otherwise. Because the world doesn't bend to thought. It bends to force, to fire, to presence. And that presence begins the moment you stop asking, am I ready? And start declaring, I'm here. The paradox of the human mind is this. We are given the gift of reflection, the power to analyze, dissect, and understand. But too often, we become prisoners of our own intellect. We think that thought alone will change us, that thinking deeply will solve our problems. But thought without action is a stillborn idea, an illusion of progress that leads nowhere. Nietzsche's philosophy teaches us that to think is divine, a great gift indeed, but to act is freedom. And this freedom? It's the only force that can truly transform our lives. It's easy to become captivated by ideas, to feel safe in the realm of theory. But theory is not life. Life is action. Life is movement, change, risk and failure. When you act, you engage with reality. You confront your fears, you challenge your limitations. And in that act you change. You become someone new. Someone who isn't just thinking about life, but living it. Fully, unapologetically, imperfectly. The universe does not reward contemplation. It rewards decisions. It rewards courage. It rewards those who dare to move before they're ready. Those who understand that the act of living is more important than the thought of it. So ask yourself, what are you waiting for? What are you thinking about, over-analyzing, but never doing? Perhaps it's time to stop thinking about the next step and start taking it. Perhaps it's time to stop questioning your worth and start living like you already have it. The moment you move, even if it's imperfect, even if it's unsure, you will feel the universe shift, not because the path is clear, but because you have stepped onto it. And that in itself is the beginning of all change. Remember, you will never know enough to begin, but you can be enough, right now. In this moment, don't let your thoughts rob you of that. The greatest act of freedom you can ever achieve is the courage to move, the courage to trust yourself, and the courage to act before the world tells you it's safe, because the universe doesn't wait, and neither should you.